didn't grow up with any identity. It was just going to a place, a certain kind of feeling and connection, and spent time there, going around studying yeshiva a little bit. But it's really when I met this kind of very iconoclastic Rabbi Davidin that I kind of, went into that world, and I kind of followed his path, which was a very bizarre path indeed. And that was a moment of realization for me of something that, a door appears that you don't even know existed, and then you just walk through it. And once you do, everything is different. And so I had that moment, but, I had the moment, I had a similar type of moment, in Shechem in the army when I had that experience where something just breaks, unexpectedly breaks, and you realize, and you talk about a morality moment, right? For me, it was seeing the hatred in the eyes of those kids and realizing that if I was them, I would hate me too.
Could be wrong, and we even tried to support them. I think there were 30,000 people employed in Israel every day, and we were allowing billions of dollars to go to them directly and through Qatar. So they had the wherewithal to build, as they say, another Singapore, but instead they built, and it's mysterious to me how they could have done it without our knowing, they built 500 kilometers of tunnels that they wouldn't allow their population into, but would only be for protection and attack by their own troops. Like, what better situation might there be? Have you had that name for a long time?
Since I've been born.
Since you've been born. So, did you come from a Hasidic family, or is this
I came from my father's family is from the Ukraine. It's not an uncommon name. I mean, maybe I don't know, where ultimately I came from.
But you're both on both sides. You think they came from the Ukraine?
No, my mother's family came from Poland.
Okay. So I asked Chat who you are, and it says that you're interested in Hasidism, Kabbalah, Zionism, post-Zionism, and American Jewish identity. So I'm just I am an avatar. I look like a person, sort of, but I'm actually an avatar. So, and I understand you're a fan of the Grateful Dead. Is that also true?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to read some questions, and you can answer them if you feel like it. So, what kind of spiritual or intellectual temperament did you have as a child? Did your mother love you? Did your father love you? Did you love yourself? Did you love your world? When did you begin loving your world? Is it a constant state of love now? Are you in bliss?
I don't think I've ever been asked such a question, but okay.
You can tell, are you in bliss or not? This is a binary question. You can just say, yes, at certain levels I am in bliss. Or you can say, no, I am not in bliss.
No, I don't think I'm in bliss. I think bliss is aspirational more than real for the most part. But to answer your question, look, I grew up in the suburbs of New York in a kind of secular Jewish family. I had a happy childhood. I kind of became a counterculturalist in, the early 70s and kind of got on the bus, as they say, and really haven't gotten off. I changed buses a few times, but it's basically the same ride.
So that's the best question of all, is the question of transitions. Do you have transitional moments that you felt, whoa, this is a new soul, this is a new me, a new world, and you're going to leave something behind and take on something?
I think that I've had numerous transitions. I mean, looking back at it now in my 60s, I somehow kind of think that the transitions may have been more radical than I thought, less radical, than I thought then, and that the transitions were simply kind of peeling off layers of something inside of me. And it was the externals that changed more than what was inside.
So you feel like you're getting back to an original self somehow, that's the path that you're on?
I hope so. I
Mm-hmm.
hope so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do the past layers have anything to do with, do they reflect somehow your that originary, that core self? Or are they just klipot, just kind of peels that you peel away and are gone and forgotten? Or are they something that you value?
I think it's a complicated question. It's a
Mm-hmm.
good one. It's a complicated question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that the layers themselves are both peeled off and pasted on, and that they do ultimately reveal a part of myself to myself that I didn't really know as I was going through that period, those various iterations of period of time. And I've gone, as Bezalel mentioned, like I've gone through various different Gilgulim within the course of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I still can identify with that, kid in 10th grade.
Yeah. Do you miss him? Do you miss your past incarnations, so to speak? Are there things that you would like to, if you could, like I myself, I'm still stuck in, my 16-year-old or 17-year-old, the longings and the friendships that I had then are like stably idealized. But do you have stuff that you feel that you would like to make a return to in some way, like yeah, like a return, like a holy pilgrimage to some of your past selves?
Yeah, I don't really feel like I live with too many regrets. I think that I've thankfully been very privileged as a
Mm-hmm.
person in the
Mm-hmm.
world in terms of the time that I was born and the place that I was born and the family I was born into, and was able to pursue the kinds of different changes and opportunities that I did. So I really, I think I've read too much Nietzsche to feel regret. So
No,
I
not regret. I'm talking about something, the opposite of regret. I'm talking about celebrating your past, um,
right.
and saying that somehow. I'm speaking for myself, so I'm wondering if you have a similar
Sure.
experience. I feel like there are relationships that I would like to re-envision and re-experience, and they're not present. They're way past, and
Yeah.
yeah. But so it's not regret. It's not regret. It's celebration. But it's celebration of something that's gone. It's a sort of knowledge of something that's like, whoops, it's gone. I guess, but maybe it's recoverable. Like the whole idea in of tshuva is return, right? So the question is, people like Carly Beck say, return to your true self. Do you feel, and you said that do you feel like you have a true self and it's in the present, or is it mostly in the future or the past, or you think, like, do you have a good portion in the present of your true self? Are you embodied, so to speak?
Yeah. Um, I really do think, and I don't say this, I don't really say this flippantly. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the truth that selfhood is something that undergoes a state of kind of self revelation as time goes on. So I'm learning
Mm-hmm.
things about myself
Mm-hmm.
that then allow me to reflect back on the past and see things about those moments that I didn't necessarily know. So I don't. I hear I think I hear what you're saying. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. It's not that I don't look back. I don't really. Um, I don't really feel nostalgia, which is something that we
Mm-hmm.
all have about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, about the world, about all kinds of things. I think that nostalgia is a very comforting emotion. I don't really think it's a very productive one. So at the
Mm-hmm.
same time that I feel it, I also resist it.
Uh-huh. Are there other feelings that you resist continually? I mean, I don't want to get too personal here, but are there frames of mind that you're doing battle with, or that you wish you could embrace more?
Yeah, I think I feel like with this line of questioning, I have to pay you afterwards as my therapist.
This is all I pay you for listening. That's why.
Yeah, look, I was in psychotherapy. I was in psychoanalysis for 13 years, so
Oh,
I
wow.
definitely know. Right, so I know
Okay. Yeah.
You're asking a real question. I think that one of the things that I miss is the experience of an undetermined future. That's part of
Oh,
youth, right? Where the
wow.
world is open before you, and
That's a
there are
big
all these
deal.
possibilities.
Hmm.
And you get into a particular time in your life, and those possibilities become narrower, and you don't necessarily you don't you're looking more to the past than you are to the future, because the
Hmm.
future is actually shorter than the past is. So I think I
Hmm.
miss that sense of freedom
Hmm.
in this kind of the vastness of future and possibility.
Wow.
But that's just the nature of what it is to live in the world.
Yes, I don't know. From my point of view, I feel like there are projects that I would like to do that would open, at least in my ego sense, new vistas. You've opened quite a lot of ego vistas. Harvard professor is a big ego vista. I'm not demeaning it to say it's just ego, but it's a sense of accomplishment, and I have a sense that, and also even in a classic Jewish sense, they talk about Olam Haba, the world that's coming. So a sense of, I guess they call it eschatological, like sort of an end of time reckoning. Do you feel like there's an end of time reckoning? William Blake says there is no end of time reckoning because every moment is that end of time. But do you feel like we're heading, you individually and as a group, as a collective, whether just all humanity or all beings of the earth, that we're heading towards some sort of an end of time? And what might that be?
Well, it's funny. I mean, scholars of apocalypticism will say that, well, way back 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, all these apocalyptic texts that were at the end of time were at the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously they were wrong, and someone said, no, they were right. The end of time just takes a long time,
Uh-huh.
right? So I think, yeah, we're living at the end of time, but that is probably not going to end anytime soon.
Uh-huh. Well, so, mhm. But so you feel pretty embodied in the present, but that's a very insightful and meaningful thing, that you feel like the horizon is close or closer at hand, and that you don't have, you've sort of accomplished big dreams, and you don't have further big dreams. So, and that's a nostalgic kind of experience, to say, I want to go back to my big dream phase. And,
Yeah, I would say it a little differently. I would say that I think certainly. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 67,
yeah,
and
72.
you really get to a certain phase in your life where you say, okay, these are the things that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is the things that I want to do in my life that I hopefully will have the chance to do, and they start to become more and more pressing, in a sense, than when you're 25.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just saying, I just want to experience the world. I just want to go out there. I want to travel. I want to meet people. I want to do things. I think
Mm-hmm.
your orientation toward the end time changes.
Mm-hmm. So when you were younger, like how long have you had like an academic dream? Did you have it early on? Did it evolve as it went? Did like kind of the steps lay themselves out in front
No,
of you?
not at all. In fact, I grew up in a world where I had no idea what academia was. I grew up in the suburbs of New York. There were no colleges that were nearby.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew a college professor. I didn't have, when I went to college, I really had no sense of that as a profession. I mean, I became a Baal Tshuva in 1979 and kind of entered into the religious world, the Haredi world. And then when I kind of moved out of that for a variety of reasons, I just kind of slipped into academia because it just seemed to be, it seemed to be something that was possible and something that I had the tools to pursue. So it wasn't any dream at all, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so are you? I mean, you apparently you're a scholar of mysticism as well these days as a scholar of contemporary politics, I would say. Right. And do you still relate to that? Have you had mystical experiences that you hold in you? I saw an interview with Jerry Garcia once, where he said that some of his big insights remain with him, and he carries them like pocket full of stardust. And is that something that you would find, if you had it, or do you have it, you would find distracting? Or that it might have application to what you're doing now?
I don't know if I would call. I don't know if I would call them mystical experiences. Certainly not even in a kind of more kind of normative William Jamesian way. I think I've had experiences that have led me to believe that there's more to this world than we've been told. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if we would call them mystical experiences or not, but they certainly were moments of insight that were generative for me. And do I still have them? I have them occasionally walking on the Appalachian Trail in Vermont. I have them, mostly in kind of natural settings. I have them in relationships with people, but that's not really, in a certain sense, what drives me, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a drive? Do you feel a pull still? Aside from like the people who are near you and the tasks that are near you, they pull you along. Is there some?
Yeah, I think I would say it this way. I feel like I have certain tools that I've been able to achieve and certain opportunities that I have been given. And that I have a sense of responsibility to be able to use those tools and some of that insight and some of that knowledge to contribute something to the world before my time is up. Mm-hmm. I somehow wish I could just give it all up and go live in my cabin in Vermont and just paint or write poetry or hike, but I can't seem to do that. I mean, there's something that's still compelling about being in the world and being a part of what's happening, because I think what's happening is actually from my Jewish orbit or our Jewish orbit, I think what's happening is kind of world historical, and it would be a waste of my talents to just give it up and go hiking.
Yeah, you have from what I read, Betzalel sent me a couple of articles that I guess you sent to him. So you have very definite and strong opinions about contemporary politics and Israel in particular.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I guess I remember the quote that you saw. You were a soldier in the West Bank, and you saw the look in the eye of some of the Arabs. And that was transitional, just like the look in somebody's eye, and that really set you on it. Did you feel like a monkey off your back or a monkey on your back? Does it seem? Does it seem like that this is an artifact? This whole political, like in my time, I was also a college student in the late before you, in the late 60s or early 70s, and they used to say that as soon as the politicos got a girlfriend, they doffed their political hat and became a boyfriend, and right. I don't think that's something that people would say now, but and in fact now I think there's like this super strong pull to a cultural identity. And I mean, we all have it. We all, like they say, we're all herd animals. So we have a really strong herd instinct. And does it feel like an artifact, or does it feel like something like your strong opinions? I won't even get into them yet, or have you get into them, but do you feel like they're out there, or that they're somehow, again, part of your originary self? Like they're like, I don't know how much morality people have as little kids. You know, again, my one source is it's not a one source. It's also, I think, in the Psalms, where they say that like an infant is all self-interest. You know, it's energy and self-interest, and then something changes and they get a sense of the other, and then something changes and they don't. Most of them who didn't become Trump want to gain more energy and acquire more status and power. And at some point, some people, and probably everybody who doesn't become something terrible, develop some sense of morality. And do you feel like, there's going into puberty and then there's going into morality? Do you remember a moment when you felt morality hit you, and you said, "Oh, well, I better respect this"? Or is it is it part of a herd thing? Is it an artifact that you've decided to pick up and use? Just stop me and start answering the question, please.
Yeah. Look, I could go back to, I came into a Jewish life through I came through a very strange door, right?
Mm-hmm.
I came to Israel. I went to Israel. Actually, interestingly, I was living in a kind of commune in New Mexico, studying macrobiotics and acupuncture. And the person I was studying with gave me a book that was written by Zalman Shabtai Shalomi called Fragments of a Future Scroll. And what's interesting about that is that we just published the 50th anniversary edition of that book, and I wrote an introduction to it where I reflect a little bit on it. Anyway, I decided to kind of, drive my VW bus back east and go to Israel, not for any particular reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I probably heard the word Zionism until I was in high school. And even then, I don't even remember the first time. So I didn't grow up with any identity. It was just going to a place, a certain kind of feeling and connection. And spent time there, going around, studying yeshiva a little bit. But it's really when I met this kind of very iconoclastic Rabbi Davidin that I kind of, went into that world. And I kind of followed his path, which was a very bizarre path indeed. And that was a moment of realization for me of something that, a door appears that you don't even know existed, and then you just walk through it. And once you do, everything is different. And so I had that moment, but, I had the moment, I had a similar type of moment, in Shechem in the army when I had that experience where something just breaks, unexpectedly breaks, and you realize. And you talk about a morality moment, right? For me, it was seeing the hatred in the eyes of those kids and realizing that if I was them, I would hate me too, right? That realization of understanding, a deep understanding, an emotional understanding of, something is terribly wrong here. I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is, but there's something that's terribly wrong. And I don't think I ever overcame that. And I think a lot of my thinking about these kinds of things now is generated by the moment. Now, the truth is there are many other people who serve in the Shtachim. They have a similar experience and they don't interpret it that way. They interpret it some other way. And that's perfectly fine. But, it doesn't mean that my experience is an objective one, but my experience was deeply transformative for me.
You kind of you began walking and talking differently, or did it go out? Like, was it Paul on the road to Damascus kind of thing?
No,
No.
it wasn't that. It was like, I remember when I was living in Mea Shearim and I went one Friday morning to a barber on Rehov Malchi Yisrael and I asked him to cut my payas off. And he wouldn't do it. It was a Mizrahi barber, and he would refuse. He would not. It's like, I'm not taking responsibility for this, right?
Wow.
I talked him into it, and he finally did it. But that was a another moment. This moment in Shechem, it was much more of a slow burn. Like, it took a long time. I felt something break in me, but it wasn't a vision on the road to Damascus. It was a very, you brought up with Cook earlier, right? It was a very slow turning. It's like turning a ship as opposed to turning a bicycle, right?
Turning what? A stick?
It's a ship, like turning a ship.
A ship. Yeah, I know what a ship is.
It took a long time to be able to do that, but I realized that the path had changed for me, and it really, in some way, led me to question a lot of things that I took for granted.
And could you? Did it bring up some other memory also? That look in the guy's eye.
It's very funny because not really, but I'll tell you. Look, I don't know where you grew up. I know where Batsala grew up, and I grew up in the suburbs, a liberal family, liberal Jewish family, and my experience was, I don't think I ever experienced a sense of hatred by another toward me. Right? Okay, you have all kinds of experiences as a child, right? But that idea of just like being hated in that way and being feared, not only hated, but being also feared in that way, was something that was very shocking to me. It was just not part of my personal biography. And also the realization that there was justification in that hatred and fear. It wasn't simply, unjustified. And it took me a long time to come to terms with that.
But you didn't quit the army from one moment to the next. You
No, I didn't.
How long did you stay
I finished my service and I went off and, stayed in Israel until I left. And the reason that I left Israel had nothing to do with that. The reason that I left Israel was because I finished my MA Hebrew U and got into a PhD program in America and decided to do that. So it wasn't that. It wasn't generated by that. But there was something about that, as I said, I entered in a door when I met Davidin. And then through that experience, I kind of exited another door at some point.
Wow. Yeah, I heard Mordechai Goldberg told me one or two stories about David Din.
Well, Mordechai and I lived together. We entered in. Mordechai entered in a little bit earlier than me, but we were part of the same cohort of people.
Okay. So, So, but then now I think you have a different cohort, right?
Right.
You have an academic cohort, and it's pretty much spread around academia in America, right? I mean, I'm sure it has nothing to do with Qatar's investment of whatever it is, $6 billion in academia. I'm sure there's no correlation, but it's you're joining like a big party that's well formed, well structured, well funded, and without which it might be difficult for you to. You can stop me if I'm being impertinent. Without which it might be difficult to maintain your status, as a professor at Harvard. Does that sound? I mean, I sort of left that unformed, but I'm just saying. Yeah, I'm just saying that you've joined like a massive movement, a massive, well-funded movement, and in the past you were attracted to kind of not marginal, but more secretive. Like the whole thing of David Din, as I understand it, like he was a highly charismatic, super well-informed, educated rabbi. And yet there was something kind of out on the edge, as also Rabbi Shlomi Schlechter.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's from, that's kind of keyhole kind of stuff, to fit through a keyhole. And now you're, you kind of are the keyhole. You're part of the big structure.
Yep.
And do you feel in any way weakened or strengthened or compromised, or does it scare you that you're part of a big organization? I mean, you understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I know. No, you're right. I think a lot of us, I'm sure I'm not the only one, a lot of us who kind of grew up and were very committed to particular kinds of spiritual, political, countercultural ideologies, for one reason or another, find ourselves being in the belly of the beast, so to speak. In other words, being in this tremendous, as they say about Harvard, it's really a tremendous corporation that has a university connected to it, right? So it's much more than just a university, right?
Yeah.
And so, you find yourself a part of that. And I think there is a sense of, I wouldn't call it hypocrisy, but I think there is a sense of you are in the belly of privilege in many ways that that articulate certain kinds of ways of being in the world that are antithetical to the ways that you wanted to be in the world or that you thought were right. And you have to make peace with that. And people could walk away from it, and some people do. I think probably very few do, because it contains certain kinds of privileges that you don't have without it.
Timothy Leary, what's it called? Richard Alpert. They sort of went on their own path.
Yeah, you become part of the system, and then you try to continue to live a life that you believe in within that system, the extent to which you can. I mean, I totally acknowledge that, and I'm not making an excuse for it. And my having fallen in this place at this time was a combination of, opportunities and luck in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'm hesitating, but I think we have to dive in instead of taking, hours and hours. We could do this again if you have the patience and interest. But the question of, there are a few words that are part of the keyhole, and the question is if any light shines through them. And one of the words is occupation, and another one is genocide.
Right.
Right. And so I'm going to let you speak for a moment, and tell us what you understand those to be. Are they legal? Are they circumscribed principles that have definite borders? And in what way might Israel fit within those borders?
Right. So I'm maybe this is a good kind of pathway in. I think, look, the two terms that you raise, occupation and genocide, are actually legal terms. They're formal legal terms. They don't only apply to Israel, they apply to other countries as well.
Right.
And the extent to which that those terms apply is a question of legality, and people who are experts in international law can kind of debate back and forth whether occupation applies here, whether it doesn't, whether genocide applies here, it doesn't. They don't really speak to me. I would rather use two other terms that are not legal terms, that are religious and moral terms. And I would say I would rather not speak about occupation. I'd rather speak about domination. And I'd rather not speak about genocide, but speak about Chil Hashem. I think those are terms that speak to me more to the reality that I understand Israel is confronting and Israel is being challenged by. And,
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, it's a combination, as it is in a combination in every kind of, collective enterprise. Um, uh, Both people are at fault for
Mm-hmm.
these realities to exist. And the question is there a way, since I feel like domination is wrong, and morally wrong, and I feel like Chil Hashem is religiously wrong, is there any way to remove ourselves, to extricate ourselves from those two, the moral and religious challenges, and let occupation and genocide be a matter for legal experts to decide?
So, domination. Well, do you feel like there might be an answer, or do you feel like it's a Gordian knot that can't be untied?
Right. I think I have an answer. Sure. I mean, I think that, and here I really am very much a Kantian in that way. I feel like a political reality where people dominate another is unsustainable. And we can talk about whether it's justified, whether it's not justified, whether it's necessary, whether it's not necessary. And I'm happy to talk about these things. But I think the bottom line, I feel like it's unsustainable. I'll give you an example. In the 1790s, Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to a friend. And this is in 1790s, right before he died. And he said, slavery will eventually end. And the reason that slavery will end was because the slaves will eventually revolt. It may take time. It took until 1831 with Nat Turner. It may take time, but people are not going to live in that state. They're not going to live dominated, and something is great. And of course, he was right. And when I talk to people about October 7th, my initial question, and I ask this really as a serious question, not necessarily as a provocative one. What do you think was going to happen? Like, you couldn't have predicted October 7th. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think that those people were going to live like that forever? I mean, in a certain sense, there are two ways in which, this is another language of colonialism, right? There are two ways in which Hans Kohn, the Jewish scholar of nationalism, there are two ways in which colonialism ends. Either the colonizer kills the colonized, which is what we did in the United States with the Native Americans. We committed genocide. Right? Or the colonizer leaves, like the French did in Algeria. Those are two ways to resolve that problem. The problem is, in Israel, neither of those is going to happen. Right? Because we're not going to basically kill all of the colonized, and the colonizers are not going to leave. So we're stuck in a very different kind of situation. So I would say that we have to figure out a way to live without that domination, the systemic domination. And in terms of Chil Hashem, the response is an easy one. It's basically tshuva, right? That's what you do with the Chil Hashem. You have to do, if you enact the Chil Hashem, you have to do tshuva. There has to be a national reckoning. And that's something that I sent Betzalel, right? One of the things that Solomon Schechter in 1909 wrote, gave a lecture on Abraham Lincoln on the occasion of his 100th birthday. And he said one of the great things about Lincoln was that he recognized a national sin. He recognized that slavery was a national sin. And that became the beginning of tshuva. And that's why he was a biblical figure and not just a political.
Yeah. I listened to, I don't actually read without sleeping. So I listened to, I'm really good at that. I can hold the book in my hand and I can be asleep with my eyes closed and I'd still give myself credit for reading. So I was listening to a biography of Lincoln, and there was an astounding moment where Lincoln suggested relocation of the slaves. He says, these people are not like us. We're not going to be able to get along with them. We should really arrange transport back to Africa. I think he said that. And so that's like, maybe provide some insight. Just if you allow me to go sideways for another moment, the idea of slavery certainly hasn't disappeared. Maybe it disappeared in America, but it's widespread all over the world. And I heard something about Thomas Jefferson. It's a YouTube meme, so I don't know if it has how accurate it is. But they said that Thomas Jefferson, that they were the Tripoli, that the Muslims in northern Africa were kidnapping American sailors, and Thomas Jefferson went over, and I'm talking about a lot of soldiers, more, and Thomas Jefferson went over there and said, like, "What are you doing? Like, I thought we were friends," and the sheik said, "Well," or maybe he was head of state. He said, "No, our religion provides for this. You guys are infidels, and we don't respect you. If you were Jews or Christians, then you have a demi status. You have like a half human status. You walk in the sewer and you pay a tax for just living among us. And if you're neither of those, then you have no status at all." And apparently, I have a friend who went over to one of those wealthy Arab states and bought a TV, and he said, "How am I going to get it back to my hotel?" And they said, "Well, there's a slave market," and they use that term apparently, just like a mile away from here. You just pick up a slave and then you resell it like a used car. So slavery has certainly not disappeared. That's one thing. And the other thing is that in Jewish tradition, as you certainly know, there's a positive side to slavery, which is that if somebody has committed a crime or has a debt, and they didn't have prisons, what they would do is put this guy in with a family, and he would work for the family as either a Jewish slave or a non-Jewish slave. And since he was in with the family, and he had all the rights if he was a Jew, certainly he had all the rights of another member of the family, so to speak. He would pick up the habits. They say people who are overweight, if they live with other people who are overweight, they get overweight. And people who have good moral habits, and there's somebody who's not been brought up in a way to acquire those, if he lives with a family like that, he'll probably acquire those. So there has been historically, I don't know how it worked for non-Jewish slaves so much, but for Jewish slaves certainly, that was a very positive thing. I've just been reading for about the number of prisoners in America. It's closing in on 2 million. 122,000 of those at any given time are in solitary confinement, and we're thinking, and we know that is like the worst place for somebody who's fallen off path, some good path, and become a criminal of some sort. To be put in prison is like he's, anyways, for some reason America has abdicated its social responsibility for dealing with the poor and the people who are disenfranchised, and decided that they're going to be, I think it's like per 100K, I think we have like many times more. It could be even 10 times more than other Western countries in prison. Anyways, so
let me interrupt you for a second. All of that is true, and actually, a lot of people that work in kind of Black theory and African American religion will say that incarceration laws is really another form of slavery. So when they say that slavery hasn't really ended in America, that's what they really mean. And that's actually what started happening after the emancipation of the slaves in the South. What ended up happening is the police would go and just arrest Black people on the street for loitering and put them in prison, and then put them in work camps, right? It was just another form. So all of that is true. I don't, I think that I would rather see slavery understood outside of its formal thing of one person owning another person, actually owning another person, because that's not what's happening in Israel today. But slavery is a form of domination, and we, and I include myself here as a Jew, are engaged in a form of domination against another people. And the difference between America and the Blacks and here, it's like, you could say that let the Blacks go to Libya. And you're right, Lincoln talked about that. And actually, there were a lot of black movement to create
to Liberia,
But The difference is that the blacks were brought to America. The Palestinians were here. So it's not, they weren't brought here. They're here. They were here. And the challenge, and I want to speak to this a little bit, the challenge of Zionism was always, how do you create a Jewish state in a place where people already live? And what I found, because I've been writing a book now, working on a lot of these early debates from the aughts and the teens and the 20s. What was so fascinating about it is that the people who were Zionists, almost all of them, deeply understood the precarity of that problem. That how are we going to do this? How is this going to happen? Right? So you have people like Martin Buber talking about a binational state. You have other people talking about transfer. Right? Herzl talked about transfer in his diary. Arthur Rubin talked about it. Israel Zangwill. And transfer became famous with Meir Kahane in the 1980s, but there were people talking about transfer in the 1920s. Right? We know that. I think that this, and it was called the Arab question. That was really what it was called in Zionist writing. Like, what are we going to do with the fact that we make up 10% of the population? I don't think that's a question that's even asked anymore. I think that's what's so interesting is the way in which those people who were committed to the Zionist project understood the precarity of it. They understood that this was not going to be easy and it was not going to be even possible without some kind of a solution to that problem. So what happens? Hitler comes to power in 1933, and all of the debates that are going internal to the Zionists and the non-Zionists in Palestine get swept away, and Zionism just becomes like an emergency exit, right? So how do you save as many Jews from Europe as possible, as quickly as possible? And so the Arab question gets pushed aside, and it never really comes back. And in a certain sense, and I say this with all of the humility that I can muster, and with all of the caveats, right? October 7th was basically a baseball bat to our head of that question.
Right.
And in a certain sense, it could have been a wake-up call to say, we have to change everything because this was, if not inevitable, it was a perfect storm, right? It wasn't only that Hamas committed the massacre, it was that the IDF didn't show up. I mean, both of those things were, there wouldn't have been October 7th if the army had done its job. We know that, right?
Right.
So we have that reality. And then the question is, what do we do with that?
Right. So let me try to denature it a bit. And in terms of the Israeli and the Jewish colonial enterprise, like we have, I think we only have one Jewish state the size of New Jersey. So we haven't exactly expanded it. And the Arabs, on the other hand, have, I think, 22 Arab Muslim states. And they have not, they've done a great job at scaring, or I don't know what else they did, the Copts or the Alawites or the Druze into abandoning or hiding their religions. And the Jews have not done that. And yet we're called a colonial state. And the question also, like I'm skipping around as I do to the question of occupier.
Right. Can I, before you get, can I interrupt you for
just one
second?
Second? Yeah.
Because I really kind of reject the premise.
Okay.
The idea of there's one Jewish state and 30 Arab states is a totally Orientalist perspective. The people that live in Morocco and the people that live in Iraq have very little to do with each other. They have different dialects. They're Muslims.
They're Muslims,
sure. And most of Europe are Christians, but it doesn't.
And they both speak
Europe
Arabic.
Isn't a Christian
in Iran,
continent,
yeah.
Right? So, I mean, forgetting about Iran, that's a whole separate civilization. But if you talk about people from Morocco and people from Iraq, or people from Egypt and people from Jordan, or people from Lebanon, many of whom are Christians, I mean, you're talking about different you're not talking about, there is no Arab world that we talk about it in that. That's an Orientalist invention post World War I. Just like there is no Middle East. The Middle East was invented at Versailles, right? It doesn't exist as a region. So it's better for us, I think, more productive to think outside of that Orientalist mindset.
Yeah.
Say that it's not one Jewish state versus 30 Arab states. Because what does an Arab state really mean? I mean, Syrians aren't even considered Arabs, right? They don't consider themselves Arabs.
Yeah, they're all special cases, right? They're all special cases, undoubtedly. But they are all Muslim, and they all have been terribly repressive of the previous indigenous religions. And even, I keep hearing this, and I don't hear anybody bringing it up. Actually, I must be hearing people bringing it up. The fact that in Lebanon, Palestinians, whereas Israeli Arabs are heads of banks and Supreme Court justices and 40% of the pharmacists and 15% of the doctors, whereas that's the case here. In Lebanon, in this enlightened Islamic state, Palestinians are not allowed to get higher education or to go into any of those professions. And whereas we have affirmative action, just like we did with African Americans in America, and I guess we still have with people of color, that they have a much greater chance of being admitted with lower qualifying credentials.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
And tell me what you think about this.
Okay.
The 2018 nation state law that was passed in the Knesset basically says Israel is the state of the Jewish people.
Right.
That's it. Of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So what does a person who is an Arab Israeli? It's not their state. Right. And second of all, something that Ahmad Tibi said once years ago. He said, look, I was born in Palestine. It became Israel. I'm an Arab Israeli. I'm a member of the Knesset. I'm a member of the Knesset. I'm a member of the parliament. How am I supposed to get up and sing the Israeli national anthem? It doesn't only exclude me, it erases me. The national anthem erases me. So I can be a pharmacist, I can be a judge, I can be a teacher, I can be a surgeon.
It's very tricky.
And yet the state itself, in its self-depiction, erases me.
Right. Well, it's like, it reminds me, I'm sure you won't like this analogy, but it reminds me of people who are transgender or postgender, and they say, like, call me they, and, I'm a multitude, and which all of us are multitudes, billions. And for someone to say, I'm a Palestinian, and yet, there hasn't been, as far as I've heard, a Palestinian state. Like Jordan, when they occupied the West Bank, what we call the West Bank, had no legal status there. I think something similar with Egypt, and yet,
I really think. I mean, I hear you. I think that my position, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will disagree with it, but my position is, we really have to think otherwise. We have to think in different categories, because one of the things that I think we could take away from October 7th, right, outside of the trauma and the horror and all of that, right, is this is not working.
Right.
The way we're doing things is simply not working. And it's the kind of thing, if you have your boot on somebody's neck and then they figure out a way to wiggle out of it, and they take a baseball bat and they smash you over the head, are you going to say, well, I just got to press harder next time? Or you have to say, maybe I actually have to take the boot off of their neck, because, God forbid, if something doesn't change paradigmatically, in terms there's going to be another October 7th in some way, shape, or form. It's not going to be the same thing,
That's
obviously. Right. But again, I really think that this is really, I mean, I hate to say it, but this was really an opportunity in its horror to be able to say we have to think about doing things differently, because Jabotinsky's iron wall did not hold. It didn't hold on October 7th, right? So the question, what do you do about that?
Well, the way it's often presented is that we withdrew, the Israelis withdrew from Gaza in 2005 and let them establish. It seemed to me that they were not under our dominion. I could be wrong, and we even tried to support them. I think there were 30,000 people employed in Israel every day, and we were allowing billions of dollars to go to them directly and through Qatar. So they had the wherewithal to build, as they say, another Singapore, but instead they built, and it's mysterious to me how they could have done it without our knowing, they built 500 kilometers of tunnels that they wouldn't allow their population into, but would only be for protection and attack by their own troops. Like, what better situation might there be? And also, is it not?
I have to stop you just for a second.
Go ahead.
I think it's we basically left Gaza.
Yeah.
Continue to have control over the electrical grid. Continue to have control over the water resources. Did not let them build an airport. Did not let them build a seaport. Controlled what went in and out of the borders. You can't build a society that way. There's no Singapore does not come out of not having an airport and a seaport and trade. So the idea that we left and because we left and we didn't leave, and that was Sharon's whole game, right? We really didn't leave and create conditions to create a flourishing society. It was still a society that we controlled. We controlled the borders, we controlled the airspace, we controlled the electricity. I'm not justifying.
Did they pay for all of that?
And separate from that, in 1987, we basically helped create Hamas. But because it was going to split the difference to make sure that the PA wasn't a unified voice. So there are ways in which you can. I'm just saying that there are ways in which you can tell the story,
right,
and then there are other ways in which you can tell the story.
So, a couple of things. What people often say is that if Israel were to put down its weapons, then it would be immediately destroyed. And if the Palestinians, so-called, were to put down their weapons, then and decide to live in a civilized way, that they would have a state. But they've always refused both to live in a non-combative way, and have refused multiple offers of having a state. And it speaks to the larger scene, as is what's taking place in Europe, and I guess in a more slightly hidden way in America, that they really want Sharia law. They really do believe in the Quran's, to the extent of the jihad. They don't believe in it to the extent that the word Palestine doesn't appear there, and in Israel and the Jews appears multiple times. But it seems like a global effort to take over, and they say it. Iran has been the first and clearest to say, little Satan for Israel and big Satan for America. So when people say, "Oh, we have to eliminate Hamas and we have to deal with the Palestinian problem," it seems like burying our heads a bit to a larger issue. Do we want a worldwide caliphate or multiple caliphates that are under Sharia law? Is that really what their ambitions are? Do they really subscribe to jihad? And or is this thing about billions of dollars spent in America to buy favor with the universities, is that really just about Palestine? Is that really the whole issue here? And if it's not the whole issue, so what is the whole issue? Is it, I've said enough, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that Palestinians are the most secular Arab population in the world. Go to Ramallah and go to some of these other bigger cities. It is a very secular population, not completely. And obviously Hamas is not that. Hamas is coming from the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that the idea that if Israel put down its weapons, it would be destroyed. And if the Palestinians put down their weapons, they would have a state. I don't believe it. I think it's a myth. I think it's very self-serving.
What do you think would happen?
Because first of all, you say Hamas wants the destruction of Israel, and then they'll look and say, look at what's going on in the West Bank. You have Ben Gvir and the police and the settlers that are basically having their way, and they want to destroy the Palestinians. And both of them are right?
Yeah.
Now,
it's not really Ben Gvir. Yeah. Go ahead.
The Hilltop Youth are not some kind of marginal.
How many Hilltop Youth are there?
Thousands, and many of them are not even young anymore. They're in their 40s, and Ben Gvir and Smotrich are elected parliamentarians. They're not Mayor Kahana, who was also an elected parliamentarian in his day. So we're talking about a very divided society, and when you have a society like Israel that could say at some point over 65% of the populations will say there are no innocents in Gaza. No innocents in Gaza. Not 65%
of which population?
Of the Israeli population. At certain point. I don't know if it's true anymore. But
why do you think that? Why would they say such a thing?
Because President Herzog got up and said such a thing, right?
But on what basis do you? I think they're probably thinking of UNRWA and the education that these kids have received from day one.
No innocence in Gaza means no innocence in Gaza. There's no excuse. No innocence in Gaza. That is for certain people. Intentionality vis-a-vis genocide. When you say no innocents in Gaza, all of them are guilty and all of them could be killed.
Right.
That is a genocide.
That's right.
That is a genocidal comment. Right?
It's a genocidal comment. That's right.
Wait a second.
But it's not a. It's all right. Don't worry. No. But first of all, let me just. My Rebbe just told me that my Rebbe Chat just told me that. Shlita. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Ad 100,000, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. May their dominion be long and fruitful. So they said academic literature generally says a few hundred Hilltop Youth. Commonly cited estimate puts the group at 800. Shin Bet reportedly assesses fewer than 1,000. And core activists living on hilltops is 100 to 200. Total active participants, several hundred. Upper range estimate, 800 to 1,000. That seems to go with my sense of things. I was in the courtroom the other day for a traffic thing, and I saw some of these guys, and you can see, because I tried to make pleasant small talk, about, because they were wearing tefillin and some sort of, funny, pleasant small talk, and they were unsmiling. They were scary people. But scary or not, it seems like there's not a lot of them. And I think that, the whole West Bank, my ignorance is deep and my knowledge is superficial. So,
it's a good combination.
It's a good combination. It's a pairing. It's like a, whatever. But what I hear, do they still have pay for slay? And do they still have a dictatorial government that they were a 4-year term 20 years ago? And are the people still terrified of each other and of the government, and do they believe that the government are thieves? And the answer to all of those seems clearly to be true. And I don't think Israel is the worst part of life in the West Bank. If they were really terrified of us, I've seen these people going in and doing interviews, like with just, on the street interviews of people. And they say like, yeah, our problem is the existence of Israel. But I don't really think that's even close to the core issue. I think there's an ideology. I think there's a religion, and that's more powerful than any sort of political situation here. And that's my sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I again, I'm sure, like, I'm sure a lot of your listeners will already, like, turn down my microphone. But I want to.
I don't even know who our listeners. I don't even know if we have any listeners. We probably do, but they're probably in China right now. So go ahead.
We can argue these things. I really do think that a more fundamental question is that we should ask is whatever. This is not going well for Israel. It's not going well for Israel in terms of its own society internally. It's not going well for Israel in terms of its reputation in the world, and that matters. We're a member state of the United Nations. I mean, if you wanted to be an exceptional place, don't have a state and just live in Galus. Right? Have a state, you don't have the exceptional claim anymore. So, vis-a-vis how Israel is a society, and the people that I know, certainly people that I talk to that live there, and they span the political spectrum, say things are really shitty. I mean, just existentially, not in terms of, and Israel is moving towards being a pariah state in the world. Something is not right. And the question is, do we just keep basically doing the same thing harder, or do we rethink the whole project?
Yeah,
and I really feel like I really advocate the latter, because to basically say all of these people in the campus protests, and I was at campus protests, so I personally, these people were not all anti-Semitic. I'm sorry. I know some of the people who were there. For Jews and non-Jews, these people were horrified what they were seeing on their computer screens. And what they were seeing where the computer screens was not only the destruction of Gaza, but they were also seeing TikToks of Israeli soldiers making fun of the fact that they were killing people. Like, that's what they're seeing.
And it wasn't AI, you're convinced.
Right, and it wasn't AI. So that's what they're seeing. So, you could say that, yes, does anti-Semitism creep in? Sure, 100%. Were there things said at those campus protests that were anti-Semitic? 100%. I can tell you what some of those things were. But to say that protesting the mass destruction of a society, I wouldn't call it genocide. I call it sociocide, right? But to protest the mass destruction of the society, the killing of tens of thousands of children, dropping 2,000-pound bombs on civilian neighborhoods, that protesting that as anti-Semitic, that does one thing to me. It cultivates anti-Semitism.
Right. I'm sure you know history a lot better than I do, but can you picture a scene where something similar might have happened, like neighbors, whatever, try to or have plans and continue to get? I mean, I guess it happens it happened for a little while in Montreal, like the Native American, whatever they're called, wanted First Nation, and some places in Spain, I think, wanted to do stuff, and probably some places in Belgium. But if there were an organized and majority of people that were educated, and if UN aside, because UNRWA sort of denatures any value that they may have had, if this were to happen in any other place in the world, would do you think we would do a Dresden, we would do a Hiroshima, or we would say, gee, we have to rethink this? Because even though these guys have a religion, and in terms of your business about saying about they're not so religious, like we hear the muezzin every morning, the call to prayer at 5 a.m. I used to hear it louder. And every Arab that I know here, I'm living in southeast Jerusalem, is religious, and they're to the last person. So I don't know, in the West Bank maybe there are fewer of them, but here they're all Muslims. And
but being a religious Muslim and being a jihadist are not the same thing.
Right. So I've heard from people, again, who spend their time collecting numbers and theorizing about them, this IDSF group, and they say that 25% of the local Arabs, that is to say Israeli Arabs, would support Hamas, would support October 7th, and that's utterly terrifying. And to me, apparently to no one else, but to me it is. And they say 70% of the West Bank would do it, and probably a similar percentage, or maybe higher, in Gaza. Like, what might any country do faced with this kind of thing? Historically, in other words, if you just take a snapshot of whatever, Tijuana and Baja, Mexico, arming themselves to the hilt, and assuming that America was the size of New Jersey, and firing missiles, like thousands of missiles, into San Diego and Coronado and Redondo Beach. What might America do? So, I'm trying to be, practical. And I know it's very frustrating to be faced with a situation that we don't know what to do. And the thought occurred to me, and it's of course aberrant and unacceptable, but if there were times when Jews converted people to Judaism, and I interviewed a guy named, whatever his name is, Zion Ben Zion or something, who says, well, a lot of them actually, and I've asked, and at Ramat Rachel, I used to say to every Israeli Arab, I used to say, I heard a lot of you guys used to be Jews, and almost without exception, they would come up with something saying, yeah, but that was 1,500 years ago. Or one guy said, nonsense, shtuyot, and then 2 minutes later, he said, well, actually, my great-grandmother in Morocco was a Jew, and she married a Muslim, and then my grandmother married a Muslim, my mother married a Muslim. So he says that not only are there many who, and the guy in the Schwitz, in the sauna, he was probably 20 years old, and he already had a response. He said, yes, that's true. We were farmers, and the Muslims came in, and they said, convert or die or leave. And we were very attached to the land. As you know, one of the 3 pillars of the Jewish religion is the land of Israel. And they apparently were committed to the land of Israel, or at some level, or to their farming land or their farming life. And they said, well, we're staying, So it's weird. And this guy proposed something about, well, we'll give them, an intermediate status between being Jews and non-Jews. Anyways, as he says, or somebody said, since common sense or even elevated, intelligent analysis has been an utter failure in making hay out of this situation, making this into a positive situation, we better think of something that's maybe, as they, they have post-gender, post-rational. We need to, do something that's not normative and that we think maybe doesn't make sense. But I'm just throwing that out because.
Ben Gurion, to what your point, Ben Gurion once had a really interesting novel solution to the Arab question. That was right.
Yeah.
He basically made the same kind of assumption that, well, maybe these people.
Oh, you froze. You froze. You
Well,
keep
to
going.
solve the problem.
Start that sentence again. Ben Gurion suggested the Arab problem. Go ahead, because we're having a freeze moment.
He's froze again.
So why don't we solve the problem? We can solve the Arab problem very easily. Ben Gurion said.
Yeah.
We just basically say they're all Jews.
Oh, there you go. But then if they're practicing
now,
Muslims,
he was kind of saying that he was saying it almost tongue in cheek in a way.
Yeah.
But look here. I think the non-normative.
The only problem. Let me just interject that in Israel, to become a Jew is like pulling a hair through the eye of a needle, or whatever the expression is, a camel through the eye of a needle. They make it so difficult. In America, not. But anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
No, but you don't have to do that, because you can go back to Sanhedrin in Sfat in the 16th century of Yaakov ben Rav, who was basically dealing with conversos who were coming from Spain and Portugal as Catholics who were claiming that they were once Jews.
Yeah.
And basically the argument was they didn't have to convert. If they were anusim that were not voluntary, then they didn't have to convert.
Right.
So you just basically, I don't think the Rabbanut's going to like that very much, but that's a problem for the Rabbanut. Yeah. Anyway, we're in the level of fantasy right now, which is fine.
Yeah, but what you were saying about Ben Gurion, they should make them all into Jews.
I have another non-normative solution, which I'm sure you're not going to like, but
I like it already
anyway.
I like it.
I think the way to create the potential for true coexistence between the people that are living between the river and the sea, right? Jews, non-Jews, Christians, Muslims, Druze, is to basically abandon Zionism and create another model for living as a dual national entity. That is, and that's not necessarily. This is cutting. Trying to cut the. But I'll tell you what I mean. I'll tell you what I mean. I think that Zionism was the greatest Jewishly generated modern Jewish experiment that we have. Right. I think there were two pillars of modernity that are the most fundamental for Jews: emancipation and Zionism. Right? Those were the two things. And emancipation created the conditions for Zionism. And Zionism created the entity called the State of Israel. Right? There's no doubt about that. And Zionism saved millions of lives. There's no doubt about that. Given the makeup of that state, I don't think it can continue to function as a sustainable ideology for the Jews and the non-Jews that are living in that state. So it's not basically saying like Zionism is evil. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying Zionism had its time, right? In the mid-19th century, Joseph O'Sullivan developed this thing called Manifest Destiny as a justification for taking over the Oregon Territory in America. That white Christian America was destined. This was the promised land of white Christians, right? America. And it had its time. It did its job. It actually, perpetuated genocide, but let's set that aside. And then America moved on. So I don't, this is a position which is anti-Zionist, pro-Israel.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
I'm not basically saying that. I'm saying that Zionism is an ideology.
Okay,
there are very different kinds of Zionism for sure. However, the kinds of Zionism that Martin Buber, Judah Magnus, Henrietta Zold, Hans Kohn, their Zionism would now be called anti-Zionism. They were by now. So they were not in favor of creating a Jewish state. They were in favor of creating a Jewish and Arab state, meaning they were not ethno-nationalists. And the reason that they were not ethno-nationalists, for the most part, is that they experienced World War I.
Okay.
And they saw what ethno-nationalism produces, which is mass death and destruction. So they were in favor of the Jewish homeland is a Jewish homeland. That's a separate issue, right? Zionism, even in its let's say, binational margins that we talked about, is a project of ethno-nationalism. And I don't think that ethno-nationalism works when you have a large population of non-ethnics living within that ethno-national state, except through domination of one form or another.
Oh.
Sure. The Jewish homeland, the Satmar Rebbe thought it was a Jewish homeland too. The Satmar Rebbe loved the land of Israel, and he left in Rav Kook.
I mean,
and you're not giving it up. That's the point. First of all, look, Menachem Fruman said, if we create a Palestinian, and Yoel Ben Nun too, but when Menachem Fruman said, if we create a Palestinian state, I want to stay in Tekoa, and I'll happily have a Palestinian.
It's interesting because
I just want to derail this discussion for a moment in favor of thinking about global. We can say global jihad if it's 10% or 40% of the Muslims, and have 2 billion. That's like a few hundred million or 800 million, depending on how you count. Yeah, and the way they've moved around in Northern Europe, the way they've managed to acquire for Islam all of Northern Africa and the Middle East, all of that, and to say that we have an option, that anti-Semitism is not deeply, deeply embedded in their culture and in their religion, and that we have an option to stay alive and also share the land with them as religious Muslims. It sounds fantastical, and I think that, I mean, just to say another thing about a pariah state, I think there's in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, there's a statement to the effect that, that is kind of our destiny, that we will be isolated, and that's kind of where we need to be. And there are a lot of politicos these days who say the same thing, who say if we're dependent, right? If we're dependent on other countries for our arms and for their support, we have a continuing problem. So, anyways, if you could just address that. Yeah, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But if what Israel feels like it has to become to survive is to become Sparta.
Become Florida?
Sparta.
Right?
Oh, Sparta.
Sparta. No, not like Florida. Florida wouldn't be so bad.
Florida.
Right? Yeah. If to become Sparta. No, not Sparta and Athens. Sparta. Which is what the prime minister said, right? He said super Sparta, right? I would have, your listeners go and read the history of what happened to Sparta. Right. And it was ultimately destroyed.
Okay, let me just ask one last direct question, because my son informs me that we have another interview in just about 15 minutes.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
sure.
So the pointed question is there anything that you feel that needs to be done with global jihad? Is that a real thing? Do you think it's mythical? And do you think that they want to have Sharia law in Northern Europe and in parts of America? Do you think that's mythical? Or do you think it's something that needs to be dealt with imminently?
I think, again, are there people that want global jihad? Yes, there are certainly people. Are there enough people, and is there any real possibility of that happening? I could say in North America. I can't speak to Europe.
Okay.
The answer to that would be no.
Uh-huh.
The answer to that would be no. I think that's manufactured. I think it's a largely manufactured and self-serving fear to allow us to continue to perpetuate what I think is a dangerous and failed set of
Northern Europe, you have no sense about what's going on there and what is bound to happen if in a generation or two, when the Northern Europeans don't have kids and the immigrants do.
Again, certainly I'm not a prophet nor a children of a prophet, so I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I think that at this point, that is largely manufactured in order to create conditions of not doing what we Jews who want to live safely in the land of Israel, in our Jewish homeland, right? And I'm totally committed to that, even though I choose not to live there. What needs to be done for that to happen in a way that is not only possible, but also equitable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going.
Okay, take us out.
Okay. Thanks
Mr.
so much,
Music, take us
Shaul.
out.
We really appreciate your talk, and we're glad that neither of us tried to convert the other. We're respectful of each other's ridiculous positions. So,
you know what Heinrich Heine, the great German literary figure who was a convert to Christianity,
right.
said when somebody asked him about that, he said, "I was baptized but not converted."
Okay. Well, holiness be upon you in all your. Thanks so much.